Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Positively Atheist. I'm here with you. I'm bringing you some fresh new content today. So I ran across this interesting Facebook post from a friend of mine and a religious friend of mine, and I wanted to just share it with you guys, get some feedback, and talk to you guys through this. This is about what it this modern day quote unquote skepticism we're seeing come out of the religious community. And I think this post really helps encapsulate some of the problems with it. And I want to see what you guys thought about what you ladies and gentlemen thought about this. And let me go ahead. I'm going to share my screen with you real quick. See if I can just pull this up. All right. So this is a post that I saw from this is from a friend of mine. I want to run through a couple of things on here and just talk about some of the problems with it. So first it says copied. Now, anybody puts this term right here is feeling very insecure about what they're about to post, right? But, this whole copy thing is kind of silly. That means, hey, look, I'm about to put something out. I don't know how accurate it is, but I'm going to put it out anyways. And if you don't like it, blame the people who wrote it. So, to me, it's just silly. Just if you're realist, if you can stand by, if you're going to put something out there, stand by it. But the first thing this says here is remember that one time when physicians didn't believe in washing their hands before childbirth, infected and killed their patients. The time they thought it was a good idea to treat hemorrhoids and with hot irons. And I'm going to go ahead and be highlighting some things as I go through here. The time that they thought it was a good idea to treat hemorrhoids with hot irons and treat mental illness by removing a portion of the brain. And when they give x-rays of pregnant women who disfigure babies by giving women with morning sickness, thalamus. Now, this person here in this video is, just so you know, she's actually a nurse. So she's posting this from the nurse's perspective, which is even scarier when I get into the reasons why I'm posting this, because she's a nurse, right? And if you want anybody understanding critical thinking, the scientific method, you want nurses and your medical staff to believe in the scientific method. And she's posted a lot of different stuff like this, and I've seen it, and I'm like, it's scary. You have people out here who do not believe in science and who do not understand basic scientific principles, who are administering medical care to us. And this should be alarming that this is even the thing. How can you go through all the education required to become a nurse and not understand basic levels of science education? Let me continue real quick. So she said, then it says, when they said Caro syrup and milk powder were superior to breast milk. I'm going to go and highlight this word said here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and do they, because they is a trigger word too, I think is important here. And I'll get into why I say that. Okay. When doctors treated arthritis with arsenic, let's go ahead and highlight the word treated here. Promoted smoking, infected millions of people with polio. The Cutter incident, whatever that is, killed a bunch of people with Vioxx. Believed that glyphosate, forgive me for how I'm speaking about this, I really don't know how to say some of these words, didn't cause cancer, and believed that white sugar was an essential part of a healthy diet. Thank goodness someone thought to question. Now, this is where she's going to flip the script. Thank goodness someone thought to question medical science. Okay. Or we would still be bloodletting people with leeches, treating a stutter by cutting off part of the tongue, spraying kids with DDT, and treating common ailments with poisonous mercury. But God forbid we question something that lists death as a possible side effect and is exempt from all liability. Now, notice what's happening here, guys. Notice how this is getting slipped in. And we all know what this is talking about. This is we're talking about vaccines. For a minute, right? And then she ends with saying, question everything. Okay. Now, this is a lot to unpack. Okay. And the reason I want to make this video is because this is a perfect example of this whole quote unquote modern skepticism from the religious right and their attempts to basically demonize science while at the same time trying to use science to do so, right? And this is a major problem. This is a major problem because this is a nurse that's posted this, right? So in this article, this little post she's posting, in this single post, she's creating a lot of misinformation. She's spreading a lot of inaccurate facts, and she is questioning the legitimacy of our vaccine system and vaccination system, and undermining the very field of study that she has actually dedicated her life to this point to support. So, and she's doing this in ways that she doesn't even realize, right? Because I'll get into more of why I'm saying this, because let's take a step back from this post and let's talk about a couple of things. First of all, what is science? Okay. So many people don't understand what science is. They don't understand what the scientific method is. They don't understand basic tenets of science, right? This article will help us establish what's important to understand about science. So let's look at this starting off. Remember that one time when physicians didn't believe in washing hands. Okay. Key word here is believe. They didn't believe. Now, what's scientific about a doctor not believing in washing hands? Because this did happen. This is a fact. For a while, for most of human history, people did not understand this thing called the germ theory of disease. It's not that they believed it, it's not that they denied it, right? It's they just didn't believe in it. They didn't have any methodology to show them this mechanism called germ theory of disease. Well, at some point in human history, humans were able to use a thing called a microscope and discover that there's a hidden world in our world today called the germ world, where you have these small living organisms that wreak havoc in our blood and our bodies. And yes, this was a crazy notion when it first came out because nobody had any evidentiary experience. Now, what's important to point out here is that until that time, no one was justified in believing in germ theory disease. I know this sounds kind of crazy. This sounds like, oh, this is against science. No, it's not. This is actually, the truth of this is that before germ theory disease was shown through evidence, people were actually justified in their beliefs. And it's the same thing with like the flat earth, for instance. Prior to, let's just say, call around 2,000 years ago, where humans discovered the earth was round, using shadows and using other evidentiary practices, what was most people's experience of the world? Well, they looked around them. The earth appeared to be flat for most of them, right? So if someone would have came to them and said, hey, the earth is round, believe it or not, they were actually justified in holding to a flat earth position at the time. That doesn't mean the earth was flat then. It doesn't mean it was ever flat. All it means is that, technically speaking, by use of the scientific method, the earth people were not justified in concluding the earth was round. Now, the truth is, were people justified in believing earth was flat? No. There was no knowledge yet of whether the earth was flat or whether the earth was round. People's personal experience was the earth appears to be flat, right? So somebody might say, well, that was their scientific knowledge at the time, but it wasn't. That's not a scientific position. Just looking around and noticing that the area of the planet you happen to be on is flat is not a scientific it's not the scientific approach to arriving at the conclusion that the earth is flat. You have to actually be able to demonstrate that the earth is flat, right? But prior to 2000 years ago, they didn't really have any metrics to be able to show that. It wasn't until I forget who it was that actually came up with, who actually figured out first. I should probably pull it up real quick. Earth round first discovery. I should know this, but the earliest documented mention of the concept dates around the 5th century BC, when it appears that the writings of Greek philosophers in the 3rd century BC. Hellenistic astronomy established the roughly spherical shape of the earth as a physical fact and calculated the earth's circumference. So around the 3rd century, early scientific methods revealed the earth was round. And it wasn't until that point that any official position on that could have been justified as a scientific proposition. Remember, the only way to justify something as a scientific proposition is to be able to demonstrate its validity. So let's get back to this article. When it says that science physicians didn't believe, that she's throwing this out there as a critique, right? Because they didn't believe in washing hands before childbirth, right? Like somehow people like her were the ones, true critical thinkers knew basically that, because at the time you did have people, listen, right before there was a hypothesis that there was some type of microbial, some type of small organisms that were causing these infections. There was a hypothesis, but it hadn't been demonstrated to be true. So doctors did not have a scientific reason to begin washing their hands until the microgerm disease had been demonstrated to be true. So she's throwing this out there. This post is throwing this out there like this is somehow vindication, like the people who came before this, the evidence, were somehow justified in their belief, but they weren't. They were not justified in their belief until science demonstrated that the hypothesis was correct, and it did. One scientist came out with microscopes, and they were able to see this small world, and they will demonstrate its validity. At that time, and only at that time, was one truly justified in holding the quote unquote belief that germs were creating these illnesses, and they should be washing their hands. And I know that sucks to say, but this is the limitations of science. The difference between science and speculation, or science and mysticism, is one key difference: demonstration. Can you demonstrate that your hypothesis is truly correct, or a theory, or that it needs to be moved up in the scale of acceptance in people's lives? Prior to the microscope, no. So this is not a vindication that somehow these early people prior to the microscope were somehow justified. They weren't justified. Were they correct? Yes. They just happened to be correct. Those few people who, for whatever reason, had this idea, oh, maybe there's like these little bugs that are crawling around in our skin, and we should like wash them off, right? Sure, they had those ideas, but they just happened to be correct. Just like with flat earthers. Were there people prior to the 3rd century who believed the earth was round? Yes. Were they justified in that belief? Probably not. See, this is the difference between the scientific approach of things and the mysticist approach to things. So you have a approach that uses science, and then you have an approach that uses essentially magic, guessing, right? Could you guess and be correct about things? Yes, of course. Are you justified in those beliefs? No, you're not. You have, in order for something to be A scientific approach is something that it has to be justified and demonstrated. Okay. So let's get back to this post real quick. Let's same thing is true here. Look at this. The time they thought it was a good idea to treat hemorrhoids with hot irons. Ooh, sounds painful. Treat mental illness by removing a portion of the brain. When they gave x-rays, okay, and I'm not going to read all this again, but you can see it, because I think I kind of made my points already. Is it true that sometimes people guess the correct answer before they're able to demonstrate it? Yes. Does that somehow undermine the scientific method? Not at all. It doesn't. Because guess what? Those people were not shown to be accurate until science and the scientific method was able to come along them, beside them, and demonstrate the validity of their claims, right? This is the only time that one is justified in believing anything. And I know this is a hard pill to swallow for people who are religious, who have strong beliefs in different things that can't be justified through natural means, that they have to use faith to make these justifications. But this is where this article is coming from. This is coming from the position of, hey, I feel insecure because I can't justify certain beliefs in my life. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to make it look like all the people before me who were also insecure and unable to justify positions, that just because they happen to be right, this all of a sudden now makes me feel better about my position. But it shouldn't. It should not. Because for every one person that happened to guess that or had this idea that the earth was round, you had 1 million people who also guessed that the earth was flat prior to the 3rd century, this moment in history where we were able to determine through mathematical calculations that the earth was round, right? Listen, people guess all the time about all kinds of things, right? But guesses are not science, right? Science did not change all of a sudden and say, we were wrong. Washing hands is now a good thing, right? Science didn't have a position, did not have a sound position. There was no way to demonstrate any of the claims prior to this. There were no way to demonstrate any of the claims about whether or not the earth was round or flat in that example. She gives another example when they gave x-rays of pregnant women and disfigured babies by giving women with morning sickness. Okay, so same thing. Were there people who, for whatever reason, suspected that x-rays were bad for pregnant women? Sure. Were there women as well who, as this article points out, were there people as well who suspected that somehow and I haven't looked into this, but I'm assuming based upon the article that there must be some truth here. There are people who suspected that thalidomide given to women who were experiencing morning sickness would be disfigured? Yes. There were people who thought that. Were they justified? No. And this goes for all of these issues. Now, here's why this is an important video, because she says all this to make a case somehow that, oh yeah, I don't have, basically what she's saying is, because basically what she's saying is, hey, here's an example of a bunch of people who got it wrong. But there's 2 things I want to point out to all of us. First thing is, how were these issues corrected? Not through less science. They were corrected through more science. The only way to fix bad science, and I know this sucks for some of you people who have these faith positions, the only way to fix bad science is to have more science. See, these articles are posted somehow to make it seem like science is not reliable, right? This is the whole point of this post, that somehow, just accepting science and the scientific method is somehow not a reliable thing. That there are people out in this world who have a secret insider perspective that you should value instead of valuing the scientific method, right? The scientific method is somehow flawed. Look at all these mistakes that were made, right, in history, and science was part of it. But what they don't tell you is how were those problems fixed? How were they discovered that that babies were disfigured from giving thalamo that's gonna kill me. I can't say that. Thalidomide. How was it discovered? Through science. How was it discovered that the earth was round, even though many people thought it was flat? Through science. How was it discovered that um, arsenic was not a good treatment for arthritis because it could kill people? Through science, studies, double-blind studies, more science. See, this is the thing about science, and this is the most powerful thing about science. Science is a self-correcting mechanism. You can't fix it. You can't, and science is and science, and this is going to kill some of you. This is going to bother some of you guys who are religious out there. But the scientific method is the single greatest source for truth that humanity has ever discovered. And what I mean by that is not some mystical like thing. What I mean by that is quite simply this. In order to fix bad science, you need more science. The scientific method is the primary way in which we discover truth in this world. Is it true that some people guess the correct answer? Absolutely. But they're not justified in that guess. They're not justified in that belief until you use a scientific method to demonstrate its validity. So we're going to read real quick the actual, this is a definition of what the word science is. Scientific method, a method or procedure that has characterized natural science since the 17th century, consisting in systematic observation, measurement, and experiment, and the formulation, testing, and modification of hypotheses. Now, this is what I mean when I say the scientific method is a self-correcting method. It corrects itself, it fixes its errors, and that's what's designed to do. In fact, it rewards those who find errors. And this is one of the funniest things about a lot of these religious people who are trying to somehow discredit science by pointing to the fact that some people guessed the correct answer in the past. It's funny because in order for this whole theory, there's the work, there has to be some underlying like secret agenda by scientists to cover up the truth and to hide and obfuscate and try to purposely harm people and harm the truth, right? To attack truth. But what's funny is the easiest way to become famous as a scientist is to disprove a previous theory. This is the goal of science. The goal of science is to discover what is real, right? To knock out all the things that people thought previously could be real or people had opinions on, right? Science is self-refuting and self-reflecting. It is the scientific method is the only way to discover what the truth actually is, and that's why I say the scientific method is the best way to understand what truth is, because that's the purpose of it. The purpose, you can't discover truth without the scientific method, without, as it says here, and I'll show you a couple of things. As it says here, you can't discover science without observation, measurement, and experiment, and the modification of a hypothesis, right? That is what science is. That is what science is. And the reason why I'm saying this, and the reason I'm pointing this article, is because the very end. The very end here says, look what it says here. But God forbid we question something that lists at death as a possible side effect. Because this is the real problem. And this is why we should all be concerned when we see articles like this. Because now we're moving out of the realm. Look, if you want to believe the earth is flat, fine. Okay. If you want to believe that, if you want to believe that there's a teacup flying around orbiting the sun, okay, cool. Believe that. If you want to believe that there are positively, for sure, advanced alien species on other planets, okay, cool. Believe that. I mean, that sounds kind of cool. But here's the problem. When you go down this road, this is where it ends. It ends with dangerous conclusions. It's funny that one of the first things she mentions about hand washing in the beginning of this article, because there are more and more people. One of the things we discovered when this whole COVID thing happened is how little people took microgerm theory of disease serious. You know how many people don't wash their hands when they go to the bathroom or after they go to the bathroom? It's crazy. Apparently, it's a lot of people. And we have effectively, in this country, in the United States, we've effectively knocked out the flu this year. The flu, there's all these reports now that flu cases have just been abysmal. Now, of course, a lot of people die from COVID, but what's happened is people are paying more attention to washing their hands, right? So it's funny she mentions this because these are dangerous philosophies. Coming to the conclusion, there are people out there who literally don't believe in germ theory disease. They do not believe that you get sick from germs. Still, in 2021, there are people who still think that disease and illness comes from demons. So instead of taking their child to a doctor to get medical treatment to treat simple diseases they may have, like a sickness or a whooping cough, no, they pray for them. They pray for the kid. There's a story about two parents just got put in prison for this. And I think there was the second child that this happened with. Instead of taking their children to the doctor, they reject the very first point on this screen based on the same exact philosophies. What? Not understanding microgerm theory of disease, not believing in it because guess what? It doesn't line up with their preconceived notions. And she ends this post with the very same thing, the ideology that she starts with. People believing things without justification. So this is the real irony of these posts. So as a result, we have real harm being done. This little thing at the end is pointing out this whole widespread, unjustified concern for vaccines. It's not justified. There's no data to support that there's these problems. And now, is it possible that some people can be harmed from certain vaccine injections? Of course. There is no such thing as a perfect treatment. You know how many people die every year from ingesting Tylenol? Or name it. You know, people die from vending machines. It's insane. There's actually a list you can do. List of people more than sharks. There's this funny list that you can actually see. 14 things that kill people more than sharks. I'm going to put it up on the screen real quick. So these are 14 things. I'm not sure am I sharing the right screen? Let me see here. Let me try this again. Okay. 14 things that kill each other more than sharks. Vending machines. Vending machines kill 13 angry people a year by falling on top of them. Selfies. We all saw this coming. 12 people succumb to the final attraction of selfies each year, according to recent studies. How? Car crashes, electrocution, being run over by a train, death by grenade, falling off a cliff, falling into an active volcano. falling out of the bed. Now, volcanoes, champagne corks, messy handwriting, animal drawn vehicles, elephants. Okay. But she wants to point to vaccines because some people die from treatment from a vaccine occasionally, supposedly. Now, remember, there is no actual evidence of any from now. I don't know about the recent. I know there's like 6 or 7 people who succumb to fatal illnesses, direct, quote unquote, in correlation with their vaccination shot. Now, those deaths, from what last time I checked, are yet to be determined. But let's just say, for the sake of imagination, for the sake of conversation, that 6 or 7 people out of, last I checked, there's 250 million people have been vaccinated for COVID in the United States to date. Let's just say 6 or 7 did die. Okay, what are we talking about here, folks? Do you know how many people die from wearing their seatbelts every year? How many people are killed by seatbelts? Let's look at these stats. In 2017, seatbelt statistics, the national usage rate of seatbelts was 89.6%, 11% increase from 2014. Okay. Look at these numbers. People, an estimated 14,955 lives were saved by seatbelts nationwide. Okay. Now, here's the thing. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to find it. Can seatbelts kill you? Let's just look at this. Can seatbelts kill you? And the truth is, yes, sometimes seatbelts can kill you. I've heard stories. Yeah, people, if you have your seatbelt on, you get submerged in water. Some people die from that. Some people die from the seatbelts cutting them. I actually just heard a story about a woman who, her daughter was actually decapitated by a seatbelt. She like fell asleep, and I guess the seatbelt was like in a certain weird angle, got into a car accident, decapitated the daughter. But ladies and gentlemen, I have important news for you. Wear your seatbelts. Just because some people have died from a seatbelt harming them does not make seatbelts unsafe. It doesn't mean that you're safer without a seatbelt. Statistically speaking, you are much safer with the seatbelt, even though there might be some inherent risk in wearing one. And the same is true with these vaccines. But what she wants to do is these people want to convince you that because some people have a unjustified hypothesis, that they should be treated with just as much credibility as the people who do have the justified hypotheses and theories, right? That they are somehow equal and that everyone is equal on this playing field, but they're not, right? Some people are using science to come to conclusions. Some people are using using mysticism and wishful thinking to come to their conclusions. And this is the most important thing for us to know as a society. What is the difference? How do you know when someone is using scientific procedures to come to it? And here's the chief difference. Is it demonstrable? Can someone demonstrate to you using metadata, at the very least, metadata analysis? Are there any double-blind studies that support your conclusion? Studies or actual any peer-reviewed data? Or are they just saying it? Listen, nobody is telling you don't question things. In fact, Science is all about questioning. Its number one goal is to question. By definition, if you are a person who, if you are asking a question, you are applying the scientific method by asking a question, by asking whether or not something is true. That is the beginnings of applying the scientific method. But then that's not where you end. You don't just ask a question and there's in there. You take that question and you expound it, and you break that question apart, and you find out, how can I demonstrate whether or not this question leads me to the truth? Then you can do it. You can do the science yourself, ladies and gentlemen. You can actually go and do it yourself. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe statisticians. You can actually do these experiments yourself and find out the truth, or at least the closest version of truth you can find. And this is the power of science. It puts the ability for you to discover the truth in your hands, right? But what's happening right now in messages like this is not science. This is speculation. This is hyperbole. This is opinion masquerading as science. This is pride and arrogance masculating or being, this is pride and arrogance masking itself as humility, masquerading as humility. And this is not humility. Humility is not trying to undermine the methods in which you're trying to support. And ladies and gentlemen, this is a nurse posting this article. A nurse. This is insanity. And it's time for us to put an end to it. And you know, I here on Positively Atheist, this isn't a channel about being about atheism in general. But part of being an atheist for me is valuing knowledge. Like, how does one come to a belief system in anything, right? If it's not demonstrated to be true. And this is something that changed for me when I became an atheist. You know, I used to be very conservative, very and a lot of my ideologies, including one of the most important thing was, well, not important things for this conversation was I was anti-vaccine. A lot of the same ideologies that led me down the path of belief in a higher power and a God actually led me directly to the path of being anti-vax. It created distrust for me in the scientific method, distrust for me in understanding science. Now, I loved having a cell phone. I loved having modern society where we're free from polio and all this kind of stuff. But I found myself constantly undermining the same processes that led us to this place where we're as a society. You want to know why your life is so comfortable right now? Why your lifespan is so high? Science. Why do you have your phone? Because of science. Why do you have this computer you're watching this on, or your smartphone? Science. So I want to encourage people to continue questioning, because that is science. This is not questioning. This is holding up people who had guessed things as somehow that they are the ones who are actually saving the world. They're not. They're not doing anything. The people who are doing the work are the scientists, the people who are asking the questions, who are looking for the truth, right? These are the real people saving us and making the world a better place. And it's time to stop undermining them. Yes, question everything, but question everything and look for the answer. And that's the chief difference between these people who are just sitting around guessing, who have guessed that Earth was round, who guessed that people got sick from not washing their hands, and between the difference of people who actually figured it out. And there is a huge difference in this. And I hope you guys can find that difference for yourself. Thanks for watching the channel. Please like and subscribe to this video, and I'll see you soon in the next video. Thanks. Bye.